I have a problem. Well, I have a lot of problems, but this specific problem is I accidentally ruin games for my friends all the time. If we ever start playing a multiplayer game that I at least somewhat enjoy, I will end up spending every waking moment of my life either trying to get better at or learning about the game, and it gets to the point where it's just a miserable experience playing with me because, I've taken the fun out of the game, and I don't like that. I am tired of accidentally ruining games for my friends. So now I want to do it on purpose. Welcome to Casually Creative. I am Joseph, also known as the guy who wanted to make his dream game in a year, only to burn out a few months later, not learn from his mistakes, and start an even larger project, which, to no one's surprise, didn't work out too well. But now I'm back to make games in a brand new game engine I've never used before because the other one I was using and got somewhat comfortable with had a lot of controversy I'm way too lazy to read about. So here we are. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to make impossible games. I am trying to actually learn how to design and develop games. I would like to eventually create something I'm proud of, but I want these games to just be aggravating to play because, well, I think it'd be funny. Think like Jump King, but just like lower your expectations many multitudes below Jump King. Like if Jump King was made by a 6-year-old in Scratch, that's kind of what I'm going for here. Anyway, let's get into the plan. So let me preface this by letting you know that I'm terrible at game design. I understand and accept this, and it's kind of the whole reason that I'm doing this series of minigames. I just figured if I embarrassed myself in front of upwards of tens of viewers, it would kind of force me to get better at game design. Plus, I'm setting expectations low, so it's going to be hard for you to be disappointed at this point. So until I get some experience under my belt, I'm going to just kind of copy stuff from other games that I've played and kind of make them worse, I guess, in a way. And we're going to start off by copying a game that I spent far too much time in, a game that I'm sure you know but also don't enjoy, old school RuneScape. And I'm probably already boring you at this point, so I'll make this quick. So old school RuneScape has this encounter called the Inferno. It's very hard and very impressive that I've done it. My friends, however, are not that impressed and think it's hilarious how long it took me to complete it, so I thought this would be a good place to start making their lives miserable. In general, the Inferno is 69 waves worth of combat that take around 90 minutes to complete your first time, but I'm going to be focusing just on a specific wave. Simply put, this wave has 3 large enemies that can attack with different attack styles every few seconds, which is signified by a specific animation. You can only protect yourself against a single attack style at a time, and if you fail to protect yourself from an attack anytime during this about 2 to 5 minute encounter, it pretty much just instant kills you and sends you back to the very beginning of the entire Inferno, wasting about 60 to 90 minutes of your time. Admittedly, the most difficult part of this wave is the fact that if you die, you have to restart, but I am way too lazy to make 90 minutes worth of content, so we're going to focus just on this specific wave. So here's my plan. Since RuneScape is basically a glorified rhythm game, since you can only take actions every 0.6 seconds, which comes out to be about 100 BPM, I'm going to make a very simple 2D rhythm game where you can only take 1 action per beat. There will be 1 main enemy type that has 2 distinct attacks with different animations, and the player will have some basic movement, an attack, 2 shields, 1 for each enemy attack, and then I'll also throw in some way to actually win the game. I'm thinking of making a minor enemy that just has a health bar and does nothing else. Because if you defeat the main enemies, the ones that are actually dealing the damage, well then it gets easier after you kill the first one, and I don't want this game to get easier over time. I'd rather make it get more difficult. And speaking of that, since it's a rhythm game, why not add in some downsides to when you don't get the notes correct? So let's make you get stunned if you have too many bad or missed notes, because that sounds fun for me. So even though I've never built a rhythm game, I assume the most important part is, the actual rhythm system. And I had no idea where to start. Luckily, my years of software engineering experience really came into play here, and in no time at all, I was able to find someone else who had basically already done what I wanted to do. So it didn't take long to make a completely custom and unique rhythm system for my game that was able to play music and track user input. I will say I am actually glad I found this way of doing it because I was just going to add a timer which sent off signals every so many seconds depending on the BPM, but this way works a lot better. The simple way of how this actually works is it tracks how long a song has been playing through the audio server in Godot, and it sends out signals at certain intervals based on the audio's actual playtime and the BPM value we set, instead of just basing it off of a timer. This way we can account for latency within the audio playback, and we can get the exact playtime of the song. Also went ahead and made some very simple visuals, a note that goes across the screen, and a goal area where you have to press a button when the note hits that area. The way that the system recognizes the quality of the button press, so if it's like a perfect, a good, or or a bad, is I put a collider on the notes and then put 3 different sized colliders on the note goal. So when you press a button, we just have to calculate which of those colliders are overlapping and we have our score. So this kind of set up a system where we can track user inputs and have a place to manage them and track how well they were pressed. And with this backbone of the game created, I decided that despite the vast amount of practice that I had from living with myself every day, I was tired of looking at something so incredibly basic, so I used my immense creative prowess to create some graphics for the game by downloading them from itch.io. I then heavily struggled with setting up the tile map because for some reason I couldn't follow the simple instructions that came with the art, but eventually I was able to build a map in a program called Tiled and then import that into Godot, and just like that I had the best designed map that I had ever made. Which is not saying much because, well, it's also the first, but for what we needed, it was good enough. So after mastering building my own rhythm system and designing some very custom assets from the ground up with no external help at all, I figured it was time to actually work on the character. So I again whipped out my favorite pixel art creation software, itch.io, and found some character art that I was happy with, and then started importing those sprite sheets into Godot. It started out perfectly fine. I created an object for the player, added some idle animations, one for each direction, and even though I've never used it before, I found it fairly easy to use the animation tree in Godot. It kind of made a lot of sense. I used a blend space 2D to change the direction or change the animation based off of values in a vector 2, which I found fairly straightforward. And with that in place, movement was easy enough to add in. The character is just hopping a full square whenever you press the movement key, and you're not moving continuously, you're just moving one square at a time. So I just had to figure out the amount of pixels they would move, add that in when you press a button, and movement was pretty much done. I didn't add in any movement animations because I just teleported the player from square to square when you actually move successfully. And that was a design choice I made intentionally, and it wasn't because I wanted to be lazy. I then added the flags to signify which shield was pressed, and the way that I set it up is if you press a shield button on a beat, you'll be protected for the rest of that beat, the next beat, and then the beat after that, it will go away. So you're only really protected for one full beat. And the reason for this is I didn't want someone to just have a shield active forever and then just get lucky and that's the only attack that gets sent out from the enemies. I wanted to limit the amount of protection that you had. So moving on to the attack animation, I wanted the player to be able to attack in the direction of the mouse. And since the character sprite I was using had 4 distinct attack directions, I had to basically convert the mouse position into one of 4 strict cardinal directions. And to do this, it was pretty simple. I just got the angle between the global position of the player and the global position of the mouse, which ends up giving a value between -pi and +pi. And then I just assigned certain values to be left, certain values to be up, right, down. And then I had a way in the code to signify which, animation to play. And you'd think, since now that I could get a simple cardinal direction of the mouse compared to the player, and since I had a pretty easy time setting up the idle animation directions, you'd think I'd have just as easy of a time setting up the attack animations, right? I mean, it's basically the same thing, but just using different animations instead of idle, we're using the attack ones. So it should be pretty straightforward, right? It wasn't. I started out doing the same thing. I added in another blend space to control the attack animation, and then I could signify the direction with a vector 2 value, and I thought that would work perfectly, but it just straight up didn't. I could not figure out how to get it to work. For the life of me, I could not figure out how to swap between 2 blend spaces. So what I ended up doing is adding in a one-shot node and connecting that to the attack. So it would always be playing the idle animation, and then when you did an input for an attack, it would trigger the one-shot and flip over to the other blend space and then play the corresponding value. The problem was it only really played the first frame of the attack animation, and I, to this day, cannot figure out why. Luckily, the first frame of the attack animation kind of looks like an attack. So, that sounds like a problem for future Joseph, and I decided to just fully subscribe to the mantra of good enough, so I just moved on. And speaking of subscribing, did you guys know that if you scroll below the video, there's a big red button that says subscribe? And clicking on that is a great way to get notified when I make new videos, which, based on my current upload schedule, could be, next week or 2 years from now. So if you actually want to know when that video goes live, hit that sub button and, hit the bell while you're at it. Why not? I mean, it's free. It'll make me happy, and God knows I could use something. So at this point, I had struggled so much with pretty much every other part of this development process and just of learning Godot in general that I had surprisingly actually learned something. So I was able to easily put together the object and animations I needed for the main enemy, and was able to plug in the ability to choose a random attack, perform the corresponding animation with that attack, and then I just decided to sound out a global signal when the attack is triggered. And that's probably a really bad idea, just setting out that signal for each of the different enemies that I have. But you know, as the saying goes, it's good enough. I was able to retrieve that signal on the player itself, detect if the proper shield was active, and then apply damage if necessary. Again, probably not the cleanest way, but it works. To round out the rest of the mechanics, I added a simple skeleton sprite whose only purpose is to take damage. I then added a way to let the player deal damage to it, and this pretty much wrapped up the main mechanics of the game. So with the main gameplay loop established, I decided to focus mainly on some final touches, UI, and bug fixes. The main things I added during this process was the stamina/stun feature. So if you get a miss or a bad, you lose stamina. When you run out of stamina, you get stunned. I also added some UI elements just to make things a little bit more visually appealing. Not very visually appealing, but you know, a little bit. I also decided to add some debuffs at certain HP thresholds for the skeleton. One is a blind, which makes the notes fairly transparent, and the other is deafen, which turns down the volume of the music significantly. I toyed around with doing an enrage phase where it doubles the BPM of everything, and that ended up being pretty much impossible, so I decided to not do that. And during this phase, I was actually able to fix the attack animations to get it so it actually played the full attack animation instead of just the first frame. The way I ended up doing this is I switched the animation tree type to a state machine, and then just had 4 different states, one for up attack, left attack, down attack, right attack. And then in the code where I was already detecting which direction the attack was going to be, I just played the certain animation rather than have it go to a blend tree and pass a vector 2 value to it. It's just playing different animations. I don't know why I didn't think of this in the first place. That being said, I hate that this is how I do it, but that's only because I spent so long doing it wrong earlier. Anyway, after that was done, I decided to take care of the rest of the bugs that I had found. Did some internal playtesting to determine how much HP the enemy should have, the player should have, how much stamina the player should have, how long the game should take in general. And with that, it was pretty much ready to let my friends give it a try. The first person I had tried out was my friend Sam, and this one wasn't necessarily to piss him off. I actually wanted him to playtest the game and give actual suggestions so we could kind of clean it up for the future. Not to say it didn't aggravate him at some points. No. You're so close.
Fuck. I knew exactly where I fucked up. I went off beat on one shield.
But since this was more of a practical playtest, we spent a decent amount of time coming up with some nice changes, some quality of life things like changing the color of the perfect good and bad text, things like that, just to make it more visually appealing and make the game make a little bit more sense. I think the biggest thing we added from this was adding a grace period. So if you get stunned, you can't lose stamina for the next few beats, just to make it a little bit easier to get back on track if you were kind of off a little bit. To compensate for that, we did make it a little bit harder by making the skeleton teleport across the room, so you're not just standing in one place attacking the same thing for the entire time. Now it's going to move at certain HP thresholds. That, combined with the debuffs added earlier, I felt like added a decent amount of skill to it, or a decent amount of variation to it. So with that all done, I decided to have my friend Adam give it a try. Beginning to think that Sam's just absolutely terrible at video games.
Yeah, I do feel very embarrassed right now.
It took Sam like 10 minutes to beat it last night, and now I'm worried I made it too easy. Or you're just a god gamer. Now, I got a lot of confidence from Sam playing it because it took him a little bit to beat it, and he was getting a little bit aggravated, and I felt, as a whole, we made it more difficult than when he played it originally. So when Adam literally beat it on his 3rd try, all of the confidence I had gained was completely gone. This was a huge problem for me because not only was this game supposed to piss people off, it was also supposed to justify the time that I spent in the Inferno by, showing how hard some of the parts were. And when Adam finished the game in like 3 minutes, I felt pretty demotivated. I actually almost didn't have people play it and was just going to release this video as, hey, I'm just going to learn Godot. But then after days of contemplating this, my savior came through. The only person that could have lifted me from this downward spiral, well, at least slow the speed of this downward spiral. And finally, I got the reaction that I was hoping for.
My health is, you know, this is okay. This is okay. I just need to figure out how this works, the main mechanic works, and then we'll be all good. Oh, I'm regressing! No! Not like this.
I will tell you right now, you have not successfully shielded a single attack.
How is that possible? That's a perfect E. Okay. 81! We're climbing. I'm climbing. We're doing perfectly. We were doing perfectly. Shit. This dude better not move on me. I can't see! Wait, I can't. Why can't I move over? No, not like that.
That's a good question, actually.
I'm swinging at the fucking wall. I'm swinging at the wall. No! No! I don't know. I don't know how Adam beat this game. I can't do it. I can't play this. I'm done with this game. Ugh.
All right, so this game wasn't a complete success, but for the few weekends worth of work that I spent on it, it's a start. This project was more of a way for me to start learning Godot and just get back into the swing of things in terms of game development, because it's been about a year since I've touched anything. And in that respect, I think it was pretty successful. Now, unfortunately, if you want to actually try this game, it's way too riddled with bugs, and it's just in general super janky, and I just don't feel comfortable uploading it anywhere publicly. I'm gonna be honest, I don't want anything tied to my name that is in this current state. But I will be making more of these games and more of these videos, and eventually I'll make something that is not completely garbage and that is worth uploading somewhere publicly for you to play. So if you do want to play something made by me and you want to see more of these videos, just hit that subscribe button. If you do really want to play this, or you just want to support the boys at Casually Competitive, head on over to casuallycompetitive.tv. I will release the game for like the members over there because, well, if I'm gonna get harassed by someone, I might as well make a little bit of money off of it. That being said, games that are actually playable will not be locked behind a paywall. I will release those when the video releases. I just want it to be something that I'm at least moderately proud of and happy with. That being said, that is all I have for this video. I hope you guys did enjoy it. I am Joseph. This is Casually Creative, and I will see you next time.